I'm Tommy D from the KnicksBlog.com. Joining me, as always, Brian Geltzeiler, hoops critic, to talk about what are the Knicks going to do moving forward structurally from a roster perspective. Brian, no Moke Hamilton. Moke is not feeling well. We miss Moke. Get better soon. But let's get into, first things first, the coaching situation. I agree with you that it's Woodson or possibly Phil Jackson. You had Sam Amick from Sports Illustrated on your podcast the other day. Give us your feedback on where the coaching situation is from what you understand.
Well, I do think this, Tommy, that the Knicks are leaning towards Mike Woodson here. I think it's been reported this week that negotiations have started. That may be premature. I'm not sure it's moving along as quickly as it's certainly been reported. From speaking to Sam Amick, it's apparent that Phil Jackson has some interest. He gave an interview to Mark Heisler of Sheridan Hoops a few weeks back that essentially Sam defined to me as wine me, dine me, then sign me. So I think from that standpoint, Phil certainly has an interest in the job or an interest even talking about the job if he's approached. Not sure the Knicks are going in that direction. They're happy and comfortable with Mike Woodson. And here's the thing with Mike Woodson, Tommy. I think he did a fantastic job with this team this year. He took a team that was really struggling with a lot of injuries, didn't let them use that as excuses, put a slower tempo system in that fit the personnel better, and the results certainly were there in the regular season. Ran into a buzzsaw in the playoffs. That would have happened if Red Auerbach was the coach.
Right. I've heard several times, at several different times this season, that Phil is interested definitively. How do they not at least reach out to him? That's the puzzling thing for me. Is he's there, he's ready to be spoken. Is it Stephen A. Smith said something on SportsCenter the other day? That's Jim Dolan saying, you have to come to me. You have to ask me to have interest in you, not the other way around. And that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't. But it's interesting because Chris Broussard had a report last week that I thought was very accurate. Broussard's report was this. What he essentially said is that the issue with Phil Jackson and the Knicks had nothing to do with money. It had to do with power. And would James Dolan want to grant Phil Jackson full power over everything in the organization? That's the issue. And the Knicks understand if we bring Phil Jackson in here, we have to give him the keys to the shop. He's the president of the organization and the head coach. Everything that happens here is going to run through him. He makes all decisions. You have a group running the Knicks right now with Dolan and Glenn Grunwald and Allen Houston. I'm not just
Scott O'Neal.
Scott O'Neal as well, who's got a lot of power there. I'm not sure these guys want to cede their power so quickly to anybody. And that's a lot of what brings this back to Mike Woodson being the most viable candidate at this
Dolan,
stage.
and I get the Knicks are obviously a bigger moneymaker than the Rangers, but he's given Glenn Sather the authority and all the power, probably too much at times, for about a decade, over a decade. Because he has Stanley Cups, Phil Jackson has rings.
Absolutely. But here's the thing about that, Tommy. Okay, James Dolan loves the game of basketball a lot more than he loves the game of hockey. He believes he knows the game of basketball a lot better than he knows the game of hockey. He can hand Glenn Sather the keys because he doesn't have a lot of his own ideas of what needs to happen personnel-wise with the Rangers.
Fair point.
James Dolan's got a mountain of ideas of what he thinks needs to happen with the Knicks, right down to this is what we should trade for Carmelo Anthony, and I don't care what Donnie Walsh says, I'm doing what I want to do anyway. And that's the big issue here. Power with the Knicks for Dolan to turn over is very different than power with the Rangers.
That sound you just heard was Knicks fans just breaking into tears, by the way. As we get into roster management, roster stuff, obviously the Jeremy Lin situation is important. Is he in MLE? Do they let him just walk? Obviously, with the jersey sales and the marketing, I just don't see that being the case. But if you're Glenn Grunwald, you have the opportunity to make changes. What are you looking to do as it relates to roster movement? Because there really isn't much movement to be had.
Well, Tommy, if the Knicks fans were crying then what you just said, they're going to be crying a little more what I have to say now. Because the fact of the matter is there's not much. They're at a dead-end roster situation. Jeremy Lin is coming back. They're going to sign him to the mid-level. There's not a doubt in my mind because of what he means business-wise. And I'm not looking to certainly denigrate what he did on the court. He was very good on the court and will make this team better as their starting point guard. Fact of the matter is they're not going to have a lot of they don't have cap space. They're maxed out with their three big players with Chandler and Anthony and Stoudemire. It's a problem. They're going to have to look at veteran minimum guys, minimum salaried guys, free agents off the street to kind of fill some roles that they need. J.R. Smith's not going to be there anymore. Baron Davis's career is most likely over, sadly, because he would have filled a nice role as a backup point guard. So you're in the market for a couple things without a lot of money to spend. Essentially, as Norman Dale said in Hoosiers, this is your team.
This is it. Now, people will look at Carmelo Anthony as the reason why that is the case. if they're going to lose in the first round, hindsight always being 20/20, you could really make the case that the Tyson Chandler move wasn't such a great move. Moving forward, you have a front line that hasn't necessarily worked together. Obviously, Carmelo's going to get that blame. The point guard is a big part of what's bringing all those guys together. But let's say, for argument's sake, they don't bring Chandler and they still have their amnesty. Billups walks away. Now you're in a completely different situation with Melo and Amari.
Yeah, here's the thing, okay?
And I like Chandler. This isn't to knock the player. As you would say, Chandler's Defensive Player of the Year. He's a fan favorite, a crowd favorite. But just to play devil's advocate to everybody who wants to complain about Melo.
Let me start with this. Tyson Chandler is one of my favorite players in the league, Tommy. Defensive Player of the Year, well-deserving. Love what he brings defensively. Love what he brings on the leadership side. Fact of the matter is, the Knicks maybe shouldn't have used their amnesty clause to bring him in. Amari Stoudemire has got an uninsured contract, okay? He's had microfracture surgery on his knees. And your one insurance with Stoudemire here of not being the same player, which he's not the same player, was the amnesty clause. If you wait another year and you're a little bit patient, you let the Billups contract expire, now you're a player for a max player right here in this market, or could have been done something on a trade. Darren Williams is going to be available, not to say he doesn't end up in Brooklyn, but you had some options there.
Flexibility.
There's a lot of flexibility about what you could do, and more importantly, you're stuck with Stoudemire right now. Now, I think the Stoudemire-Anthony thing can work. Amari's got to change his game. He doesn't have the same explosion that he used to. I think with the right screen and roll point guard, he could still be an extremely effective offensive player. I think it still can work, but if you decided it couldn't, you're stuck. And that's the thing. The flexibility of the amnesty on Stoudemire would have created a lot of cap space. And for whatever you want to say about Anthony, people will come to play with him because if they think they can win with him, they will come and play with Carmelo Anthony.
Absolutely. Brian, we appreciate your work this year and look forward to talking the rest of the NBA playoffs with you as the season progresses.
Always my pleasure, TD.
You got it, man. And remember to get all your information on the Knicks at A Little NBA. Check out thenixblog.com, part of the SNY.TV blog network. We will be continually talking about the NBA playoffs, so stay tuned to that moving forward. See you next time.